The village of Dummer rested quietly beneath a sky painted with early dawn light, but beneath its peaceful surface, a deep and ancient fear pulsed like a hidden current beneath the river's shimmering skin. The river was their source of life, giving fish, water, and stories, yet it was also their oldest judge, keeper of secrets, and bearer of a curse whispered from generation to generation, that two men must never bathe in the river at night. This was not just a warning, but a law etched into the hearts of every villager, shaping how they lived, loved, and hid. The elders told tales of the river's wrath, a punishment meted out to those who defied nature's course, to those whose love dared challenge tradition. For many, the belief was a shield, protecting families from shame and confusion, binding the village in a fragile order. But for others, it was a chain, heavy and suffocating, forcing hearts into shadows where love whispered quietly, hidden beneath smiles and silence. Yet, even with the weight of fear pressing down, hope flickered like a stubborn flame. Some young men dreamed of a day when love would flow as freely as the river, when the curse would be seen for what it truly was, a story made to keep them apart, a lie that could be broken. Morning unfolded slowly over Dummer. Smoke rose in lazy spirals from clay pots, and the river's surface shimmered under the soft light. Yet beneath the calm, the village carried a secret tension, a quiet fear wrapped in old stories, passed down like a warning whispered behind cupped hands. The belief that two men must never bathe in the river at night was no mere tale. It shaped lives in ways few dared to speak of openly. Near the market, a group of young men gathered, their laughter loud but brittle. Among them, Ade, known for his quick wit and a walk that swayed just a little too much, caught the eye of a few curious glances. "There goes trouble," muttered one elder, half joking but half wary. Across the way, two women shared a quiet smile by the river's edge, wrapped in brightly patterned cloth. They rolled their eyes as the older women nearby muttered about unnatural ways and curses that come from broken gods. One whispered, "Those two, they think they can swim against the river's will. Ha, we'll see." For those who loved differently in the village, life was a careful dance, hidden smiles, stolen moments, and laughter that masked fear. Yet, even in the shadow of the belief, humor bloomed. Mama Amina, a sharp-tongued widow, loved to tease, saying, "This river, it's old, yes, but it's got no say in who can love whom. Only fools listen to old tales." And so the village moved, caught between fear and hope, silence and laughter, the ancient curse and the quiet truth no one dared say aloud. The dust of the road clung stubbornly to Cairo's worn leather boots as he crossed into the village, a man both familiar and foreign to these parts. His tall frame moved with a casual ease, wrapped in a loose linen tunic that fluttered softly in the morning breeze. Cairo's dark eyes flickered with a kind of shy hunger, curious, searching, not quite knowing what it was he sought, but feeling its pull deep within. He watched the village with a quiet wonder, his gaze lingering on the strong men at the riverbank, their laughter bright and careless in a way he longed to share. And for the first time, a question whispered through his thoughts. Could his heart be drawn to a man? The thought trembled, caught between hope and fear. The village's ancient belief that two men must never bathe together in the river at night gnawed at him. What if the river judged him? What if curiosity meant danger? The stories haunted the edges of his mind like shadows in the mist. Still, Cairo smiled softly to himself, a blush warming his cheeks, as the river's steady song called to something buried deep inside. Long before the village stirred, Kelechi had slipped from his hut with a familiar purpose. His spear, worn smooth by years of use, rested lightly in his hand. The river was a steady rhythm in his life, a place where the world's noise quieted and where he could simply be himself. He stepped into the water, feeling its cool embrace wrap around his calves. The first light of dawn stretched pink and gold across the sky, catching the sheen of sweat on his beautiful skin, every muscle defined in perfect harmony. Kelechi was the village's effortless flame, confident, wild, and unafraid. Yet today something felt different, a quickening, like the moment before a storm breaks. From the corner of his eye, he saw the stranger, tall and dust-caked from the road, standing hesitantly at the edge of the trees. Cairo's gaze flickered to the water, and then, as if pulled by an unseen current, locked with Kelechi's. In that instant, an invisible thread tangled between them. Kelechi's easy smile softened, eyes narrowing with a spark of something deeper, something unspoken. There was a softness there, a silent question of why a stranger could make his heart skip a beat without a word spoken. Cairo felt it too, an unfamiliar warmth blooming in his chest, a strange ache laced with doubt and wonder. His thoughts spiraled with questions, tangled with fear of the village's harsh beliefs and his own uncharted desires. Why did the memory of that confident smile linger like the sweetest secret? They were two strangers on the riverbank, but beneath the dawn's gentle light, a quiet promise whispered between them, a promise that would ripple far beyond the water's edge. Kelechi winked, casual yet charged with meaning, before turning back to the river as if to say, "Come closer if you dare," and Cairo, heart-pounding, felt the first brave stirrings of a journey he could never have imagined. The following day, the village was still wrapped in the soft haze of dawn when Cairo returned to the river's edge. His feet sank into the wet sand, cold and grounding. As his gaze drifted over the shimmering surface, he drew a slow breath, tasting the river's crispness and feeling it mingle with the heat rising in his chest. The memory of Kelechi's smile, bold, teasing, and so achingly alive, played like a secret melody behind his eyes. Cairo's fingers brushed the water's surface, sending ripples that stretched and faded, like the unspoken promises twisting through his mind. Was it wrong, he wondered, to be drawn to a man like this? The village's old curse haunted the edges of his thoughts, but his body betrayed him with every pulse, every quiet ache that spoke of yearning. His lips parted as a heat pooled low, a secret fire ignited by forbidden curiosity. He imagined the strong hands of the warrior and the warmth of skin against skin beneath the moon's watchful gaze. The thought both terrified and thrilled him. Was it madness to crave what the village feared? Or was it courage, the kind born from daring to touch the unknown? Cairo's breath caught, and he smiled, small, shy, but fiercely alive. Today the river was not just water. It was a mirror, reflecting the man he was only beginning to understand. Later the same day, Kelechi was already moving through the village with effortless grace, a familiar figure in the soft light. His bare feet stirred dust and earth as he made his way to the river, muscles flexing beneath bronzed skin that caught the early sun like polished copper. As he waded into the cool water, the world narrowed to the steady pull of currents beneath his fingertips. His mind, however, wandered elsewhere. Behind every smile and flirt, there was a quiet ache, a yearning for something more, something no one dared speak aloud. He thought of him, the stranger he'd seen that day at the river. Kelechi found himself replaying the brief encounter again and again, that charged glance across the water. There was a delicious torment in the uncertainty, a hunger mixed with doubt. What did it mean to feel this way? Could the river's old curse truly reach this far? Or was the danger simply the fear of stepping outside the rules written long ago? Kelechi's fingers trailed through the water, imagining the warmth of a hand in his, the brush of lips beneath starlight, a slow dance that dared to defy the night. He smiled to himself, a secret kept close, and a flame flickering in the river's depths, waiting to blaze. The heart of Dummer pulsed with life under the noonday sun. Bright woven cloths fluttered from stalls, and the scent of roasted maize mingled with fresh fruit and earthy spices. Vendors shouted their wares, and children darted between legs. Cairo moved carefully through the crowd, his satchel tucked close, senses alert. The chatter around him was a comforting hum, but beneath it lay the persistent echo of the village's old belief. Two men must never bathe together at night, they said, as if the river's curse could reach even into daylight. He tried to push the thought away but couldn't. "Aren't you that man from the river?" He froze, heart thudding painfully, and glanced up. There, leaning against a stall stacked with baskets of yams, stood Kelechi, his bronze skin gleaming with a light sheen of sweat, eyes sparkling with mischief and something softer beneath. The easy confidence was there, but now Cairo noticed the hesitation lurking at the edges. Cairo found himself smiling before he could stop it. "I am," he said quietly, almost shyly. "And you are?" "Kelechi," he replied, stepping just close enough for his voice to feel like a private thing. Their eyes locked, and for a breath, the noise of the market faded into nothing. Cairo's mind raced. Was this chance? Or fate? Did Kelechi see the same flutter of something forbidden, something thrilling? His fingers tightened around the strap of his satchel as a blush rose in his cheeks. "Didn't expect to see you here," Cairo murmured. Kelechi's smile deepened, the corner of his mouth curling with that signature tease. "Maybe the river's currents run deeper than we think," he said, his voice low, rich with unspoken meaning. For a moment, they stood too close, caught between the heat of the sun and the heat building silently between them. Cairo's thoughts tumbled. What if he reached out? What if the village's ancient fears were just stories meant to keep hearts chained? But before either could speak again, a loud cackle erupted nearby, an elder's sharp reminder of old laws and whispered warnings. The moment shattered, and Kelechi stepped back, grin intact but eyes flickering with something like regret, and Cairo watched him go, breath uneven, the taste of what might have been lingering sweet and aching on his tongue. The moon had risen high over Dummer, spilling a silver glow across the village paths. Somewhere in the distance, drums throbbed softly, but here, near the river's edge, behind the thick wall of bamboo and banana leaves, it was quiet. Too quiet. Cairo's pulse hadn't settled since the moment he'd caught Kelechi's eyes in the flicker of a torch earlier that evening. Something in that gaze had been unsettling, not in a way that made him want to run, but in a way that made him want to step closer. He didn't remember deciding to follow him down here. It just happened. Kelechi stood by the water, the moonlight painting his bare shoulders in silver. His shirt hung from one hand, forgotten, while droplets from where he had splashed his face trickled down his chest and vanished beneath the waistband of his loose trousers. Cairo's throat tightened at the sight, heat pooling low in his belly. "What the hell is wrong with me?" he thought, but didn't look away. Kelechi turned and their eyes caught. A single breathless second stretched like it might last forever. "You followed me," Kelechi said, voice low, not accusing, not questioning, just noticing. Cairo's mouth went dry. "I was walking." Kelechi's smirk was faint, dangerous. "And you ended up here." They stood there in silence, each acutely aware of how alone they were. Cairo stepped closer, too close. His shoulder brushed Kelechi's as he moved to stand beside him at the water's edge. It was an accident. It wasn't. Every nerve in Cairo's body screamed at him to move away, but instead he leaned just enough to feel the warmth radiating off Kelechi's skin. A jolt shot through Cairo. He should have pulled back. Instead he let his fingers linger, testing, tracing the faint calluses on Kelechi's palm. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them looked away. Kelechi's lips parted, and Cairo's gaze dropped there, helplessly. It was a touch that said nothing, but felt like it said everything. Kelechi didn't stop him, and when Cairo leaned in, just enough that the heat of Kelechi's breath grazed his mouth, time stopped. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. It was worse, better. It was the shiver that comes right before you give in to something you can't take back. The sun was low, spilling liquid gold through the swaying fronds. In the stillness, Cairo could hear his own pulse pounding in his ears, or maybe it was Kelechi's, close enough to feel through the tense, trembling space between them. The palm grove hid them well, no curious eyes, no gossiping tongues, just the thick, humid air, smelling faintly of crushed grass. Kelechi had come to find him, pretending it was about helping gather palm leaves for thatching, but Cairo knew better. The way Kelechi's eyes lingered, the way his voice had dropped low when he'd said, "Come with me." Now they stood here, both still clutching bundles of palm fronds like a poor excuse for why they had strayed so far. "You shouldn't look at me like that," Cairo said, voice rough, almost a growl. Kelechi's lips curved into something dangerous. "You think I don't know?" They both knew what hung over them, the whispered warnings, the elders' sharp voices declaring that two men together was not only unnatural, but cursed. Boys had grown up hearing the stories, lovers taken by river spirits, families shamed, crops withering. It had been a fear planted deep, meant to control, but here, in the shadowed grove, that fear was nothing compared to the ache clawing at Cairo's chest. "You ever think about it?" Kelechi asked, his voice low, teasing but heavy. "What they say we shouldn't want." Cairo's eyes closed for just a heartbeat. Every night, that broke something. Suddenly, Kelechi's mouth found his, no slow test, no hesitation, just the sharp press of lips parting, tongues clashing, the taste of each other hitting like fire. Cairo groaned, gripping the back of Kelechi's neck, pulling him in. They pulled apart just enough to gasp for air, their foreheads pressed together, breaths ragged. Cairo's hand was on Kelechi's chest now, feeling the hammering heart under warm, sweat-slick skin. Kelechi caught his wrist. His eyes burned. Lust, yes, but also that flicker of hesitation. "Cairo," he said, warning and pleading all at once. Cairo's lips curved, his voice breaking into a whisper that was almost a dare. "Then tell me to stop." Kelechi didn't. And then, footsteps, somewhere distant, but enough to make them freeze. "We can't," Cairo said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Kelechi's jaw tightened. "We already have." They pulled apart, just enough to breathe, but their bodies still leaned into each other, foreheads pressed together. This wasn't over, not even close. Rumors began the way most poison did in Dummer, small, almost tender at first, slipped into the crook of a conversation and carried like embers in the dry wind. Someone had seen two men lingering near the granary after dusk. Someone else said the two, Kelechi and Cairo, often walked the river's edge together. By noon the market tasted of suspicion. Women who had smiled at Cairo 2 days before turned their heads when he passed. Men lowered their voices when Kelechi neared the baobab. Children were tugged close by forearms, warned not to stare. The village atmosphere shifted, and the elders met exactly as they always did, beneath the crooked arroyo beside the river, where the stone markers had their ugly, careful carvings. The children believed the carvings were only old marks, but everyone else knew those flat, weathered stones had been set there to speak, stern symbols cut in the mouths of men who had wanted people to remember. Elder Nandi stood, his back stooped, but his voice still able to thread through a crowd. He told the story in a way the villagers had been taught to hear it. No room for questions, only a drumbeat rhythm of consequence. The Mother of Waters, he said, had been affronted once. 2 men had bathed under the full moon, and as a result of their actions the next harvest had failed. The goats had given sour milk, and 2 bodies had been found at the riverbank, eyes open as if they'd learned the secret of the deep and could not close it. "Do you think the gods take such a thing lightly?" Nandi said, palms out, his voice even. "We are one people, we eat from the same soil and drink from the same stream. If one family offends the spirits, the field of us all will suffer. This was the cost once, and today we learn to prevent it." His words smelled like burned reed and old rope, practical, grave and persuasive. They brought out the stones then, and some of the younger men scraped paint over the old carvings until the symbols shone black and fresh. Mothers hummed a cleansing song low at their breasts. It was not law, not written on paper, but it worked with the force of law because the elders could point to drought stories, to an old ledger that had once shown bad rains the year after the first tale. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the dust settled into the grooves of the path, Nememti pulled Kelechi aside. He did not speak loudly, he did not shout. He spoke like a man who could make the skin crawl by being quiet. "Kelechi," he said, tilting his head as if following the path of the river with his gaze, "there is temptation in every soul. The river is old. She remembers. We keep the river honest by telling the young the cost of careless acts." His fingers, the knotted fingers of a man who had pointed many times, skimmed the carved stone at his feet. "Mind what you do." Kelechi had met the words with a flash of anger first, hot and red behind his eyes, but the anger met the practiced calm of Nandi's manner and shrank. "You mean," Kelechi said, tight, "that if I walk wrong, the whole village must starve?" The question came out half accusing, half hopeful, that there might be a crack in the armor. Nandi's mouth did not harden. "I mean that some things are bigger than our wants." He let that sit like a stone dropped in still water. "Be careful, for your family, for the fields, for your own name." On his way home, Kelechi felt eyes flint at him in narrow corners. He realized how much the story had been crafted, not an honest warning against harm, but a neat tool to shape behavior. Tell a terrifying tale once, and men will police each other because they do not want to starve their children. Tell it enough, and suspicion becomes the village's first law. That night, when Cairo and Kelechi met in the shadow of the granary, neither spoke of the day's market or the elders' words. They did not need to. The carved stones and the elders' ritual paint had told them all they needed. Every choice now weighed like a measured bowl of grain. To step toward one another was not a private thing. It had become an act that could, by story and fear, touch the whole village. Kelechi's jaw clenched. "They sharpened the stones," he said finally, voice raw. They've polished the fear. Cairo's hands were cold around the satchel strap. They're good storytellers, he said. They make the danger sound inevitable. They stood there a long time, two men in a village breathing suspicion, the river waiting beyond the bank as if patient and unreadable. The control had been cunning, not a law carved in mortar, but a myth that pressed against the ribs until people learned to believe it hard enough to police themselves. Fear had become a fence. Night lay over the village like a closed fist, silent, tight and watchful. The pathways were empty, the cooking fires long gone to embers. Cairo had been walking the back path behind the granary when he caught it. Low voices, hushed but urgent, leaking from the small roundhouse where the elders met in secret. He froze in the shadows, the smell of earth and dry millet filling his nose, and leaned just close enough to hear. And they still believe it, Elder Maduka's voice rasped, carrying the weight of years. The river tale keeps them in line, no two men bathing together after dark. They think it's about curses, when it's really about order. Another voice spoke, Elder Ngozi. Order, yes. Roles must hold, or the village unravels. If men take to men, who tends the fields with wives? If women lie with women, who births the children? The gods do not care about these things, but the people, they need to believe the gods do. A dry chuckle followed. Fear shapes them, makes them watch each other, makes them police their own blood. A lie repeated long enough becomes the bone of the law, and the law, Maduka added, it keeps the river calm, or so they think. Without it, they might begin to choose for themselves, and then he let the words trail off, heavy with a threat too large to name. Ngozi's tone turned almost amused. It is not about curses, Maduka. It never was. It is about control. The curse is the leash, and they have worn it so long, they've forgotten it is there. Cairo's pulse pounded in his ears. Each word struck like a stone to the chest. The curse, the warnings, the fear, the stories told by firelight had been nothing but a tool, a lie to cage hearts, to keep love itself in chains. His hands curled into fists, nails biting into his palms. He thought of Kelechi's smile by the river, the way it had warmed him and terrified him in equal measure. He thought of every quiet longing crushed under the weight of tradition. Tradition. Cairo stepped back into the night, breath sharp in his throat. Anger burned hot under his ribs, tangled with something heavier, grief maybe, for all the years stolen by a lie. By the time he reached the edge of the path, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the God's will. It never had been, and somehow that truth made the night feel even darker. The forest edge was quiet in that dangerous way that meant it was listening. Evening had painted the sky in bruised purple, streaked with dying gold, and the air smelled of damp leaves and earth. Cairo's boots crushed fallen twigs as he pulled Kelechi deeper into the shadows, past the point where anyone from the village could see them. Kelechi yanked his arm free, breath sharp. "Cairo, what is this? Why drag me all the way?" Cairo turned, his face set tight, eyes glinting like embers in low light. His chest rose and fell too fast, the anger inside him barely contained. "I heard them, Kelechi. Every word, the elders, the whole damn thing about the river's curse, about what it does to men like us." Kelechi froze, confusion flashing in his eyes. "What about it?" Cairo stepped closer, voice low but trembling. "It's a lie. Always has been." They admitted it themselves, laughing about how it keeps us afraid, how it keeps us from touching, from wanting. They called it a perfect trick, that the river will punish those who let their desire roam free. His lips twisted. "But there's no curse, only them, only control." The forest seemed to pull tighter around them. Kelechi stared, chest heaving, the words sinking in like a blade. You're certain? I heard it all." Cairo growled, his voice deepening with the weight of truth. "They've been using it for years to choke the life out of men like us, to keep us caged." His hands flexed, fists tight enough to make his knuckles pale. "And I can't." He broke off, shaking his head, eyes suddenly fierce and wet. "I can't unhear it, Kelechi. I can't keep living like this, pretending the fire in me isn't real." Kelechi took a step back, his back brushing against the rough bark of a tree. The air between them was thick, not just with the danger of being caught, but with something hotter, hungrier. "Cairo." His voice was a whisper, but his eyes wouldn't let go of Cairo's. If that's true, then everything we've been told is nothing, Cairo finished, stepping so close their breaths touched. Nothing but chains, and I'm done wearing them. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Kelechi's pulse thundered in his neck, and Cairo's gaze dipped, first to his lips, then back to his eyes. The forest smelled of rain and leaf rot, but under it was something else, warm skin, quickened breath, and the ache of something long denied. Kelechi's voice cracked. "You're playing with fire." Cairo's reply was almost a growl. "Then let it burn." The moment stretched until it was unbearable, their faces inches apart, fingers twitching at their sides, so close that one wrong breath would make them touch. The truth they now shared was too big, too dangerous, and too intoxicating. The river whispered like it knew their names. Silver moonlight slid across its surface, glinting off slow ripples, as if the water itself were daring them to step in. Kelechi's gaze stayed locked on the current, jaw tight, hands clenched at his sides. "If we do this," he murmured, voice low, "there's no going back." Cairo stepped closer, so close the front of his body almost brushed Kelechi's back. His breath warmed the shell of Kelechi's ear. "We were never meant to go back." A muscle jumped in Kelechi's neck. He glanced over his shoulder, eyes catching the moonlight, that same wild mix of want and fear that had haunted Cairo for weeks. The first step into the shallows was shockingly cold, the river curling around their ankles like a living thing. Both inhaled sharply, as if the chill bit into something deeper than skin. Cairo's eyes never left Kelechi's. "Still alive," he said quietly, lips twitching into the faintest smirk. Kelechi huffed a breath that could have been a laugh, could have been relief. "You're impossible." Cairo moved even closer now. "Say you don't want this and I'll stop." Kelechi didn't say it. Instead, he stepped deeper, the dark wetness soaking into the loose cloth around his waist. His chest rose and fell faster now. Cairo followed, the space between them collapsing. Kelechi's breath caught. His hand came up to Cairo's face, cupping his jaw, holding him there as if memorizing every angle, every inch. "You're going to ruin me." "No," Cairo said, leaning in until their foreheads touched. "I'm going to free you." The kiss that followed was nothing short of claiming, deep, certain, the kind that spoke of years of holding back. The sound of the river faded beneath the rush of their breathing, the world narrowing to the two of them, to the warmth in the cold water, to the realization that the curse was only a lie. When they finally broke apart, they stayed there, forehead to forehead, the current swirling between them. "You feel that?" Cairo whispered. "We're still here." Kelechi's lips curved in a slow, dangerous smile. "Then let them all see." The path back was narrow and soft underfoot, the night deep enough to make every sound sharper. Most of the village slept, but not all. A few shadows stirred at the edges of doorways, villagers leaning against wooden posts, squinting into the dark. Cairo and Kelechi walked side by side, their clothes still damp, hair dripping under the moon. Their nearness, the quiet ease between them, was impossible to hide. No words were spoken by the onlookers, but Cairo caught the way their eyes followed them, the way one woman's brow lifted before she slipped back inside her hut. One thing was for sure now. Word of this would spread before sunrise. Inside Kelechi's hut, the air was warmer, heavy with the faint scent of wood smoke and herbs. They didn't light a lamp. The dark felt safer. Kelechi pulled a blanket over them as they settled onto the woven mat, bodies still close but not tangled this time. Kelechi blinked awake, his lashes brushing Cairo's collarbone. For a moment he only lay there, listening to the rhythm of Cairo's heartbeat, steady and strong. Then the weight of the day crept in. "They'll talk," Kelechi murmured, his voice low, almost swallowed by the morning hush. "The elders, the whole village, they'll say we've cursed them all." Cairo tilted Kelechi's chin until their eyes met, his gaze calm, almost fierce in its steadiness. "Let them say it, we're still here, breathing, whole. The river didn't swallow us, the sky didn't split, the gods themselves stayed silent." Kelechi exhaled, torn between fear and a swelling pride that tightened his chest. "You make it sound simple." "It is," Cairo whispered, brushing his thumb over Kelechi's lips. "They've kept us afraid with shadows and stories, but last night," he paused, letting the silence finish the sentence. His hand slid down, pressing Kelechi closer. "Last night proved the only truth that matters." Morning light spread across the village. but the air felt heavier than usual. By the well, two women fetching water whispered, "Did you hear about the two men? They walked out of the river, alive, together." One's voice trembled, but her eyes shone with a spark of disbelief. A man overheard, frowning. "The elders said it was forbidden. If those two survived, what else have we been fooled into?" His tone was quiet, but sharp, the kind of whisper that spreads faster than fire. Meanwhile, in the gathering hall, the elders sat in tense silence. One slammed his staff against the ground. "If doubt takes root, our control is gone." Another leaned forward, voice cracking. "We must remind them, fear is our shield. Without it, they will not obey." But outside, murmurs spread. Parents of queer children held their heads higher that morning, their fear easing. And among the youth, some smiled slyly, emboldened. A seed of rebellion had been planted, and the elders felt it, slipping through their fingers like sand. The chamber reeked of incense and fear. Shadows clung to the mud walls as the elders circled one another like cornered jackals. Their voices cracked with fury, not wisdom. "They mock us openly," one barked, slamming his fist on the wooden table. "Two men in the river, and no lightning struck, no plague fell. The people are whispering already." Another leaned forward, eyes glinting with venom. "Then we remind them. We tell them the gods are merely biding their wrath. We demand sacrifices, harsher rituals, blood if necessary." A third scoffed, but there was unease in his tone. "And when nothing happens again, when the skies stay calm, you'll expose us all as liars." The room fell into heavy silence, broken only by the wheeze of the eldest among them. His face sagged with bitterness, his voice sharp as a blade. "If the people begin to question the curse, they will question everything. Why women bow to men, why men cannot love men, why we alone decide what is holy. If doubt spreads, our power dies." The others stiffened. That was the truth they all feared. Not gods, not curses, but the slow unraveling of obedience. Outside, faint laughter drifted from the village square. Ordinary laughter. Children playing, women gossiping, men calling to one another. The sound made the elders flinch, as though joy itself was rebellion. Their eyes hardened. "Then we crush it," hissed one, "before it spreads." But though their mouths spit venom, their hands shook. Control was slipping, and they knew it. The news of Cairo and Kelechi's embrace spread like fire along dry grass. Whispers carried it from the square to the riverbank, from the market stalls to the shade of the baobab trees. But for some, those whispers felt less like scandal and more like oxygen. Two young women stood near a well, their clay pots balanced against their hips. For years they had stolen glances in silence, their fingers brushing only by accident. But today, one reached across and took the other's hand, openly, deliberately. Their breaths trembled, but neither pulled away. The world had not ended. The sky had not split. And for the first time, their love did not feel like a sin, but a small, dangerous kind of freedom. In a narrow alley, a boy no older than 15 leaned against a wall, listening to the women gossip. "Did you see them, walking as if shame were nothing?" Someone scoffed. The boy's lips curled into a secret smile. His walk had always been softer, his voice lighter, and the elder's eyes had burned holes through him since childhood. But hearing those words, not only spoken but survived, made his chest feel less like a cage. Elsewhere, a mother sat in her hut, staring at the fire. She thought of her son, who once confessed his love for another boy with tears in his eyes, only for her to scold him back into silence. Her shame had been heavy, taught by whispers and sharpened by the elders' threats. Now that shame felt strange in her hands, like a rope she no longer wished to hold. But another father spat into the dust and cursed under his breath. He clung to fear like a shield, muttering that defiance would bring ruin. His voice trembled, though, not with conviction, but with the terror of a man whose certainties were slipping away. The ripples spread quietly, invisibly. Hearts wrestled with old chains, some cracked, some tightened. But one thing was certain, the curse was no longer unbreakable. The murmur of the village grew louder as Cairo and Kelechi emerged from the river path, walking side by side. Water still clung to their bodies, shimmering like armor beneath the morning sun. They did not hurry, nor did they hide. Each step was deliberate, each glance exchanged between them, a quiet vow that no fear could bend. The villagers froze. Some whispered in awe, others in doubt, but all eyes clung to the two men as if the earth itself had shifted beneath them. Mothers pulled their children close, not in warning but in confusion. Was this danger, or was it freedom? Fathers looked at their sons and wondered what truths they had buried too deep. And in the far corner, the elders sat rigid, their voices caught in their throats. The authority they had worn like a crown now trembled. For the first time, their power did not feel eternal. It felt breakable. Cairo's hand brushed Kelechi's. Kelechi's lips curved, soft but certain. Together, they stepped fully into the square, calm, unflinching, radiant with a defiance that was not loud, but stronger than any shout. The belief that had caged them for generations cracked, and everyone felt the fracture. Then suddenly, a boy's voice shattered the air. "I will not bow to lies anymore," he roared, fists trembling, eyes wet but unblinking. The crowd gasped, mothers clutching their children as though his words were lightning itself. But the lightning spread. An old woman pushed forward, her hair wild, her face streaked with tears. She pointed straight at the two men. "You told us our sons were cursed, yet look at them, whole, proud, alive, stronger than your chains of fear." Chaos ignited. Villagers screamed at the elders. "You made us bury our own happiness. You lied to us. Your curses are nothing but shadows." The elders pounded their staffs on the earth, their chants sharp and panicked, but the people were no longer listening. For the first time in living memory, the square did not bow to authority, it rose against it. The rebellion had begun, not with weapons, but with voices too long silenced. Then, the square exploded. Shouts turned to chants, chants turned to roars. Villagers surged forward, no longer bound by silence. Men tore down the woven banners that once hung in honor of the elders. Women smashed clay pots that bore the markings of the old law. Children stomped on the ashes of the holy texts burned into their memories. And at the center, Cairo's voice rose above the storm, deep and commanding. "They told you our love would bring curses, but look at us, alive, burning, unbroken." Kelechi stepped beside him, eyes glinting with fury and fire, his words cut like blades. "They lied to you, to keep you afraid, to keep you obedient. We are the proof their power is nothing but smoke." The crowd roared in agreement, surging closer, surrounding Cairo, and Kelechi not with scorn, but with protection, with allegiance. An elder tried to rise, his trembling voice stammering a defense, but the people shouted him down. Another villager dragged out an old record tablet, carved with the supposed forbidden law. With a scream, he smashed it against the stones until it shattered into dust. The elders shrank back, pale and shaking. Cairo lifted Kelechi's hand high into the air, their fingers entwined. For the first time, their love wasn't just rebellion, it was revolution. The village had chosen sides, and it wasn't with the elders. The village roared with victory, their chants echoing into the night, a sound of chains breaking forever. Hands raised, voices united, the people stood taller than they ever had before. In the center of it all, Cairo and Kelechi's fingers were still locked together, as if they had always belonged that way. They turned, eyes meeting, and without hesitation, Cairo leaned in. Their lips met, soft at first, then deep, sealing the promise of freedom with the fire of something new. The people cheered louder, not just for victory, but for love. And so the night ended, brighter than it had begun. The story did not end with fire and rebellion. It ended with breath, with the soft exhale of a people finally free from the weight of lies that had bound them for centuries. The river ran calm that night, carrying away the last whispers of fear. Elders who once ruled with trembling hands now sat silent, stripped of power, while villagers laughed, cried, and embraced. And so the lie crumbled, its ashes carried away on the wind of truth. Love, bold, unshaken, and unapologetic, stood tall at last. Cairo and Kelechi's spark had set the whole village ablaze, and in that fire, a new dawn was born. Remember this: when you dare to love openly, you don't just change your story, you change the world around you. This was not just their victory, it was a revolution of the heart. And maybe, just maybe, if you listen close enough to the winds that move through our own world, you'll hear it too. The reminder that love, your love, my love, every love has always been sacred. So carry this story with you. Let it live in your bones. Let it guide your steps. Let it remind you that you are never wrong for wanting, never cursed for desiring, never broken for loving. Because here, in this tale, love won, and so it can in yours. Oh, and before you go, drop me a little thought in the comments. Your words are like secret treasures I can't wait to discover.